we're so glad that you're here for our 49er Industry Chat. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I am your host and the Director of Alumni Engagement at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start the session and introduce our next speaker, just want to let you know this session is being recorded and will be available on demand on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. And just a reminder, you could submit any questions using the chat box below. And now I would like to introduce James Almada, an alumni from the class of 2011 and a current council member for CSULB alumni. James?
Thank you, Noemi. I appreciate that. I think we may have lost the screen real quick, but I'll keep going until we get that. Just a quick, to introduce myself, I actually work at Cal State Long Beach, so I see probably a few of you every once in a while, but definitely work with a lot of students. I manage a communications and marketing office on campus, so my goal is to kind of speak with students, and I'm very excited to be here and introduce our guest speaker today, who I think is going to shed a lot of great information to us all and share a lot of things. So I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but just to reiterate what Noemi said, if you have any questions, as he's going through the presentation, as he's kind of sharing knowledge with us, definitely please put that in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that and making sure that we can answer some of those as we go through or at the end of the conversation. With that said, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. Ed Skapinok graduated from Long Beach State in 1999 with a degree in marketing. He went on to earn his MBA from UC Davis. Over the last 30 years, Ed has built a career as a hospitality executive. In his current role as Senior Vice President of Sales, Marketing, Revenue, and Reservations, Ed oversees all commercial disciplines for Aqua Aston Hospitality, a hotel and resort portfolio generating annual revenues of more than $400 million. He is the immediate past chair of the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International Sales Advisory Board and was named one of the top 25 extraordinary minds in hospitality sales, marketing, and revenue optimization in 2016. Joining us today from Hawaii, so we're all jealous, is Mr. Ed Skapinok. Let's please welcome Ed Skapinok. Welcome. Well, all right, normally there's my applause for welcoming you. There you go. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that, and aloha, everyone. So it is nice to be in Hawaii, but like all of you, I'm confined to small quarters here, and just starting to get the ability to venture back out and enjoy some of the things that make Hawaii so great. So beaches and trails are starting to open up again, but I guess there are definitely worse places to be stuck in a quarantine than Oahu. But I do appreciate it, and thank you, thank you to the moderators and the staff that invited me today, and thank you everybody for participating and joining in. I really do appreciate your interest and your participation, and I do want to emphasize as well that if you do have questions, please do use the chat box. That's actually my favorite part of any presentation is a dialogue. So, but I have been asked to go over a few things with you, just talk a little bit about my professional background and my experience, talk about my perspectives on the hospitality industry, particularly how, COVID-19 is impacting our business. And then also, recommendations for recent graduates or those that are about to graduate, that want to get into the business. So happy to talk about all of those things or anything else that really comes to mind. So my background, I'm an accidental hotelier of 30 years. I started in the hotel business totally by happenstance in 1988. I was still in high school at the time, living in the San Francisco East Bay. A friend of mine was bussing tables and doing room service at a little Holiday Inn hotel there and said they needed some extra help. So I applied, got the job, and was bussing tables and doing room service as well. And, never intended to make a career out of this business. But I was young, I was eager to learn, happy to help. And, when there were needs in other departments for somebody to help out, I volunteered to take shifts and really learn the business from the inside out and, at a very young age. And so that was, a great introduction to, what I think is a wonderful industry. But, even still, I was in school, I was intending to go to college and study, business coursework. Wasn't exactly sure where my career path was going to go, but I did have certain educational goals, and I knew that I wanted a career in business. I got promoted in the restaurant and eventually transferred out to the front desk. And, that seemed to be where all of the, the activity, the sophistication was happening. So I wanted to be a part of that and kind of learn that side of the business. And started interacting with more of the hotel management, also interacting with a lot of the guests that brought unique perspectives, and particularly the business travelers that came in. I was able to kind of pick up a lot of things just in casual interactions with them. And I was starting to prepare to go to UNLV. I thought, well, things seem to be going well for me here. Why don't I join the hotel program at UNLV? It was the best in the country at the time, and I'll continue my career as a hotelier. And it was actually the GM at the hotel where I was working that talked me out of doing that. And his advice to me then was, you seem like a bright guy. You can go get a business degree. You can run a hotel with that if you like, but don't limit yourself to just one industry. Not at this point. And so I thought, okay, all right, that sounds good. So I, changed course a little bit. I actually was doing well there at the hotel. I was talking to a guest one night, actually, a regular business traveler, and was telling her, this story, and said, I know I want a career in business, but I'm really not sure what. And she asked me, what are you good at? What do you like? What interests you about business? And, after I answered the question, she said, it really sounds like marketing is your thing. And I didn't know anything about marketing at the time. I did some research, and it seemed to me that all the entry-level marketing jobs I could find were in sales. And so I talked the general manager at that hotel, a different GM this time, into creating a part-time position for me in the sales office. And I was going to the local community college there, Diablo Valley College, and was working 3 days a week in the sales department. And, very unusual, not the typical career path, but, I think it did demonstrate that if you're willing to ask, you can create opportunities for yourself. And certainly, that was the case for me. So
well, that's a good, Ed, if you don't mind, if I just ask, like, if you think about, sales, how did that what are some of the lessons you learned from the sales positions maybe that kind of, led you into this great career that you're ended up leading nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the discipline of sales, is a really useful, skill to have in any industry. And, there's also selling externally to customers, and outside of the business, but, particularly as you progress into, project roles, management roles, executive roles, you really have to be able to sell ideas, and you have to be able to sell concepts. And sometimes, and I have a lot of experience with this, selling concepts that might seem a little harebrained or unusual, and to try and win support for those, emotional support, physical support from people that have to do the work, and, financial support from people that have many other, ways to invest their resources, particularly boards of directors and asset managers. So, so I think sales is a great skill to have for anybody, even if you want to go into, any field, unrelated to business even. But for me, it really helped. And, I always took a very analytical approach to salesmanship and sales leadership. Now there's a discipline in hospitality called revenue management. Well, I had a very revenue management analytical mindset as a sales leader. And I think that helped me, to be more successful as a salesperson, a sales leader, because I took a more business-minded approach. And, so that really did create a good foundation for me, from the get-go.
Great. Sorry, I just wanted to, it seemed like a good opportunity to think about some of the things, your foundational experience right there. So.
And the funny thing is I never had any experience. I never got any training, formal training in sales until I'd already been doing the job for about 2 years. They just kind of threw me into it. And it was like literally like one of those situations, be careful what you ask for because you might just get it. And I just got thrown into this thing. I don't even think that the GM didn't even understand what I was going to be doing. I didn't have a desk or a telephone. And she's like, well, I'm supposed to be meeting with customers. And it was like, yeah, but I need to schedule some appointments to go meet them. And so it took a little bit of time, but, I was able to kind of find my way. And I did a lot of self-learning because, keep in mind, I was, at that age, I was probably, I think I was 20 years old. I was doing my general ed coursework. And, I didn't have, deep, experienced mentors to show me things. I had, people that were there, kind of working in the hotel and, they weren't that much older than me. And, I just kind of had to learn it on the fly. So I did a lot of, I read a lot of books, read a lot of articles, You know, it's interesting. Actually, I'm glad you asked this because it's taking me on a little different path, but I think it's a useful one. What would frustrate me back then, and maybe some of the students that are participating today have the same frustration, is that I would read these business books and other materials, and on the same topic, but they would all have widely different ideas, about how you should approach that topic. So sales should be done according to method A, but then this other author says, no, it's totally different. It should be done method B. Sure. And, same thing with management and leadership. And so I had a lot of angst back then trying to figure out, well, what is the right way? Because every time I pick up some materials here, they're telling me to do it a different way. And, what my advice there would be is just keep learning, keep looking for those resources. Eventually you're going to see common paths that develop through that material. And then you're also going to see things that you can adapt that work for you based on your own style and your own, ways of doing things. And that's what worked for me. So,
and I'm also kind of hearing that you were also just open kind of to do something that you were thrown at. Like someone's like, hey, can you do this? It sounded like, and you kind of took it up and you researched and you did that kind of work. And we have students, but we also have recent alum too, that are all trying to learn about those foundational years, really launching their career. I think that's an excellent example. Is that what I heard from you too? Kind of a little bit of that you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and let me fast forward a little bit because there's actually an even better example of that, and maybe that's just maybe that was some foreshadowing, and I just didn't realize it at the time. But things were going well. I actually ended up getting promoted. Now most hotels are franchised, certainly the major brands. So although you see the big hotel names on the sign outside, they're owned and operated by, either individuals or other companies, third-party managers, people like that. So I was working for, even though it was a Holiday Inn hotel, that company that owned that particular hotel had a couple of others in their portfolio. And so, they actually had an opportunity. They moved me up to Sacramento to take a position as a sales manager at a larger hotel in their portfolio. And so I took that opportunity. I transferred to Sac State. And, things were going well, but, I had developed a little bit of outreach and some networking with the corporate office of Holiday Inn at the time, because I was calling on some major corporate accounts that were doing business in the Bay Area and then, again, in Sacramento. So these are, big household name companies. And so, I was having some collaboration with the corporate office of Holiday Inn and their sales team. So I was doing that job at Sacramento about a year, going to school, and I got, one of the corporate office people called me and says, hey, we have this job open in a regional office in Redondo Beach. We think you'd be great for it. You ought to apply. And I thought, well, shoot, what terrible timing. I just transferred to Sac State. I'm working this job. I wish this call had, would come 2 years from now. And my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, says, hey, dummy, that's the kind of job people want to get offered after they've got their college degree. You're being invited to go interview for this while you're still in school. And so again, I thought, all right, well, that sounds pretty good. So I applied for it and took that position. And honestly, I was miserable. I was, it was, when I look back on that, it turned out to be the toughest time of my life. I had, it was a lot of change all at once. Both of our families were in Northern California. We moved to Redondo Beach into Southern California, changed jobs, changed schools. My dog got out and got hit by a car the first day we were there. Like everything, like anything that you can imagine that would happen, kind of happened in terms of a life change. And it was tough. Now, the company paid to move me down there, which was really unusual for somebody in their early 20s, but they did. And one of the requirements was I had to stay in the job for a year. Otherwise, I had to pay back that relocation money. And I didn't have that kind of money to pay back. So I just had to tough it out. So what you were saying about, well, you just kind of stick with it, be careful what you ask for, that was the case. But, I was looking for schools and, I knew I wanted to stay in school, but I was working, what would be considered a career level job at that point. So I didn't want to give that up. And I looked on the map. I wasn't familiar with the geography very well. So I was looking in the beach cities to see what was the closest Cal State campus. And I saw Long Beach and said, okay, I'm going to apply to Cal State Long Beach. I'm just happy now, all these years later, that I didn't realize that Cal State Dominguez Hills was actually closer, because that could have probably changed my whole trajectory.
Very good choice. We're happy you did. We're happy you did. Yeah.
But I was very happy with the program. I enrolled at the College of Business Administration and started studying marketing there. And even the Bachelor of Science being, I believe it's still a BS degree, but my friends always tell me I have a BS in BS because I studied marketing. But it was a Bachelor of Science degree, and that was different from the coursework I'd seen at other universities where it was a Bachelor of Arts. And I didn't know that those things really were that distinctive, but it was. I mean, it was, there was a lot of math, a lot of calculus, even for a marketing degree, statistics, of course, and that was good. I think that kind of helped, bring out a little bit more of that analytical side that I had. And, when I compare it to, what I was doing in work, although I wasn't a statistician and I wasn't a mathematician, but just understanding those concepts and those principles, helped me approach, I think, my business problems in a different way. And I know that the work experience that I had was definitely helpful to me in getting a better education because I was able to apply real world concepts to some of the materials that we were learning in the classroom. And I think it just gave me a broader perspective. And so I've had a lot of people, tell me, well, your situation's different. You started working and brought all of that with you. I'm your, kind of your prototypical, 18-year-old, I'm going to college, I haven't worked, how do I get that same value, that same benefit? And I think you can by, volunteering, getting involved in organizations, reaching out and just networking. I mentioned, learning and reading. I think you can get a lot of real world perspective to bring into the classroom with you just from, the most unlikely sources, and then certainly everything that I learned in the classroom, not all of it applied, and certainly not all of it applied, at that stage of my career, but it framed my thinking and it helped me approach, business situations, differently. Like I said, and just as much as the work experience helped me frame my education experience differently. Great. So I know I mentioned that was a tough time in my life. I actually, because I was required to stay there for a year, I'd figured it out. I didn't have the opportunity to turn and run and go do something else. So, and that turned out to be very positive.
Well, I think also what you studied, one of our viewers right now, Laura, just mentioned the math skill was killer in marketing, but she made it through it and agreed that the analytics helped because that's the type of education that we need when we go into those fields, right? So, but yeah, so I just wanted to mention that you have a symbiotic relationship with one of our viewers right now. So
good. All right. Well, yeah, we could commiserate on that, even after the session because that was tough and that was kind of a surprise. But yeah, very useful. I will tell you this. I mean, I use mathematical models, in my work, but I don't necessarily need to create the models. I just need to be able to understand the outputs. And particularly, I think in marketing, understanding the inputs that go into those models and how different variables will impact. And so that is useful. So yeah, even though it, probably there's many nights where you're pounding your head against your desk, it is worth it. It is for a purpose.
Yeah. So post-grad, you had the education. I know you had some, what was after, how did things look? What was kind of the movement? What were other obstacles, those kind of things? Yeah, well, one thing that kind of happened simultaneously with all of that. So, I'm kind of finding my way, in this, position that, was, initially a little over my head. I worked hard. I took a different approach to my work. Like I said before about analytics, I've always viewed myself as a business person first. Hotels and the hospitality business, that's just the vehicle I use to apply my trade. But I always wanted to be a successful business person or just a successful person in any industry that I chose. And for me, it's happened to be hospitality. So I think that approach was a little bit different than a lot of my peers, particularly at that time. And so it served me well. In fact, there I am in Southern California. I did get, the opportunity to be promoted a couple of times, at that company. And one thing I learned about the big companies back then is, it's particularly that one, was about every 18 months you could count on a major reorg. And so, every reorg, it's, fortunately I ended up, kind of staying through, even though staff positions were cut and, roles were changed dramatically. I kept, kind of moving my way up, as the situation changed.
And then, you know, again, at a very early age, very unusual, I was involved because of my positions in industry boards, you know, industry level committees. You know, I was on the editorial board for, you know, a major trade publication. And, you know, this was all happening very fast for me. And I always like to tell people I got the first 50 years of my life done before my 30th birthday, because it sure felt like it at the time. But that was a great experience. And so I wasn't just impacting the work I was doing. And that is really important to me, that the work I do have an impact on the organization, you know, where I work. But, you know, I learned then, you know, very early on that I want to have an impact, not just on my company, but I want to have an impact on the industry and the people that work for it. And certainly now that I'm kind of at this stage of my career, that's become even more important to me, because, you know, I've worked for a number of companies and, you know, have had an impact there. But, you know, I'm starting to think about, you know, the people that are coming into the business now. How can I help them? How can I set a stage in an industry for them to where, you know, they've got opportunities and can excel? Because, you know, I am passionate about hospitality now. Mm-hmm. And I do think that, you know, bridging from the way things have been done in the past to how they're done now to how they should be done in the future, I think is really important.
I think that's a great segue into something that I know a lot of our viewers are probably thinking right now, is about the industry and, you know, COVID-19 and this kind of adapting to change in this way, in this completely different way. But also I know that you have some background in getting through the Great Recession and getting your industry through that, right? So are there any lessons learned before we talk about COVID-19, or did you want to kind of tie those together in any way? I don't know what you learned from those.
Well, you know, I will say this too, and I think, you know, I always tell my staff and my teams, you know, I value transparency. You know, I'm a cards face up kind of guy. So, you know, even as I sit here and talk to you now about as somebody who's had, you know, experience, you know, in the business and, you know, multiple vice president level positions, you know, over the last, 15 years. I'm actually finding myself in a transition right now. The company that I've been working for, the one that I moved to Hawaii 3 years ago to take this position, was acquired by a large timeshare company recently. And so we're actually now discussing the details surrounding my exit from the organization. So, probably a terrible time, as many of you know, to be looking for the next opportunity. But, you know, one thing that has taught me, I will say, is that it happens, and it happens a lot. My friends and colleagues, you know, have actually laughed when I told them, which isn't the most reassuring response when you tell somebody, hey, I'm going to be out of work. They say, well, it was just your time. And you can't, you know, if you're fortunate enough to work in any industry, throughout a career, and you progress into executive level positions, you know, what they've told me is it'll happen. It was just my time. It will happen. And I think what I've learned now, you know, is not, I think I know that I'll be fine. I mean, I feel very confident, you know, that, that I'll, you know, find that next role, and I've still got that passion to have an impact. Right now, I'm just managing that period of uncertainty. And I think with COVID, that's what everybody's doing right now. Whether you're working or not, you've just got to manage this period of uncertainty. So, my recommendations there would be to, just focus on what you can do. You know, even if you're not working, you know, focus on building your skills. Networking, I've mentioned that already. And I can tell you, that was something that was very useful to me, kind of unintentionally. I developed a mentor at my old company, and, you know, he was somebody that was very helpful to me, you know, for a long time. And even though we don't talk, but maybe once or twice, you know, a year now, sometimes I'll be in a situation and I'll think, well, how would Tim have handled this situation? You know, and then that just kind of helps me put things in perspective and, you know, a little bit of a gut check on how I'm approaching and how I'm viewing things. I did mention, you know, also too that, trade associations and getting involved in industry groups, I think that's very valuable. I would tell you, for your own networking, you know, especially if, you know, those of you that are recent graduates, you know, you should be reaching out to people in your field anyway, you know, mid-level managers, you know, executives, people like that. But also look at those trade associations. Look at the people that are active in those trade groups. They're the ones that have already demonstrated they're willing to donate their time and ideas, and you should take advantage of that.
So I do want to get back to the trade groups and mentorship in just a second. I did want to ask you a little bit more about like how hospitality is being affected by the COVID-19 changes, and what reopening things look like. And I don't know if Hawaii is ahead, or how you guys are looking, but just like any knowledge that you can bring into for us for that.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned the Great Recession and other downturns. I mean, certainly in 2001, when the dot-com bubble burst, we had some significant change there, and then obviously 9/11, later that year was devastating to our business. We had at that time we had some new executive talent coming into the business, and I think that was kind of an inflection point. Hospitality was never really taken seriously as an industry until real Wall Street money started showing up in the late 90s. And then that's when you started to see C-level talent, with experience in finance and real estate, technology and marketing really start to come into our business. And so I think that influenced how we responded to the 2001 downturn, which was really devastating. And it took us years to rebound. But by 2006, 2007, we were putting up as an industry record performance. And that was the highest of highs. And then 2008 happened, and we went to the lowest of lows. But I think having better technology, better perspective on things then helped us come out of it very quickly. It's interesting. It took us years to recover from 9/11. In 2008, when all business was affected and all of the people that owned a business or worked for a business were affected, you would think that would have been a longer, more devastating decline. But really, we rebounded and got to performance, levels, sustained performance levels about 10 months after that. And, I think the lesson there, and we're certainly looking at that a lot now that we're dealing with COVID, is that the hotels that dropped rates to protect occupancy, they had a higher, what we call revenue per available room during the downturn. The hotels that held on to rate and sacrificed occupancy during that time in 2008, they actually had a lower revenue per available room, but they were more profitable during the downturn. And this is the key, when we look back, they were the first ones to rebound when the recovery started. And so that is really critical information. And, having that knowledge now, I think, is influencing a lot of what hotel companies and what hotel executives should be thinking about during the downturn that we're faced with now. Now, this is unprecedented. I mean, 80%, our business is down 80% year over year as an industry. The hotel unemployment rate, hospitality worker unemployment rate is 52% right now. More than half of the employees working in our field just a few months ago are now out of business, or out of work. So, it's very scary. I mean, there will be hotels and there will be hotel companies that won't survive this. That will create new opportunities, though, for certain types of organizations. If a hotel, goes into receivership, the banks don't want to own these buildings. In fact, right now they're working a lot with owners because they realize this is a short-term decline and the economy was otherwise healthy. And if we can, get out of this relatively quickly, then the hotel can go back to being a hotel and business as usual. It's costly for banks to take back property, so they don't want to do that. But even still, if that does happen, there are plenty of third-party management groups and investment groups that are going to look at it as an opportunity to buy. And they'll pick up these tremendous assets, at a fraction of what they were once worth. And I think that they'll build value back into them. And so there will be opportunities. But I think the things that we'll see that will be different right now, because this is what we're looking at, and I think what we'll see different going forward, is that we're going to have to offset the additional costs associated with doing business in travel.
That actually ties. We have another viewer who is asking about exactly that. Like, what do you think the future of hospitality is with COVID? But also, how does technology integrate other solutions that maybe some that the hospitality industry can take on? But how do you kind of see that future like? And what type of technology? Yeah.
Sure. Well, let me just give you some examples of kind of what we're confronting now, and then why we're going to need those types of changes, particularly with technology and some other aspects of the business. I talk to a lot of hoteliers, not just because of the work that I've been doing in the industry, but also my position as immediate past chair now of the sales advisory board for the Hospitality Sales Marketing Association. So I talked to a lot of industry executives. One of them told me that their cost per occupied room in just the last 2 months has gone up $50 to $60. And that's because they're, of all the PPE and, other materials they're having to do to address safety concerns right now. And, that's not sustainable. Another hotel executive was telling me, and this is a very prominent company, was saying, that they're talking to third-party certification companies to get their hotels certified as clean by these commercial organizations. And, they want to be positioned as the cleanest hotels when the market rebounds. And that's good, but, they're talking about paying this company $3 a square foot. And, think about how big a hotel is, not just $3 a square foot in the guest room, $3 a square foot in the building, ballroom, lobbies, everything. That's not sustainable. So, there are going to be additional costs that we carry forward out of this. So I think what you'll see is that we're going to find efficiencies that we have to develop to offset that. Technology is a big one. I mean, you've already seen, self-check-in, get used to seeing more of that. I think, more and more applications will emerge where guests can control in-room technology using their phone instead of, having to touch things like thermostats and remote controls and order room service, via the phone, all of those things. I think you'll see either active or passive health screening of certain types at all different levels of the travel experience. I know when I fly to Japan, I walk under a beam that supposedly is taking my temperature or is, creating a heat map of everybody that goes through it. And they've been doing that, for I don't know how many years, but I think you'll see things like that happening. I know in certain hotels now, infrared thermometers are being used, on people that work there, but then, I would presume, there's going to be a need with certain guests. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll see, advances there, but I think also, yield management technology, distribution channel technology is going to change because we're going to have to be able to yield and be able to sell our rooms and our meeting space at a lower overall cost if we're not able to get a higher price for it to compensate for these extra expenses. And then finally too, staffing levels. Staffing models are going to change as a result because that's our industry's #1 expense. So, people will have to do more with less. We certainly did that after, 2008. And I think you're going to see the next wave of that now. So there will be jobs, but some of them will be different than what they look like today. And ultimately there will be fewer based on, what we see the model looking like today. But as the industry transforms and as travel transforms, that could even create new or different types of positions that just don't exist right now.
Well, also it goes hand in hand. I think Christine mentioned, and Misa, who's another viewer, just mentioned, conventions go hand in hand with hotels, right? Like that's what's bringing people there a lot of the times. What do you think the future of those look like? The convention centers that are attached to the different resorts and hotels, and the meetings and how those take place. And, are there, I'm sure there's a bunch of calls happening about ways to, mitigate the impact on those, but I'm sure they're going to happen, right? So what is your kind of view and perspective on the future of those types of programs?
Yeah, a couple of viewpoints there. I mean, getting people together, physically together, is still very important. And, we were talking about teleconferencing replacing the need for face-to-face meetings 20 years ago. And, that obviously hasn't happened. I do think, though, the technology is different today, where meeting via teleconference or Zoom, like we are right now, is a much easier, cost-effective, and user-friendly experience than it was 2 decades ago. So I do think that it will transform. There are a number of companies, I know on the life sciences side of the business, Genentech mentioned recently that they've canceled all of their future meetings of all sizes. And, as a hospitality professional, that really hurts because, that's a lot of revenue, whether it's coming to my hotels or somebody else's. That's still business in our industry, and that, is part of keeping people employed and has a lot of effects. Other life sciences companies that I've talked to have said that, and I hear this a lot with other industries, but they talk about doing hybrid meetings now. So they will do smaller in-person gatherings supplemented by Zoom conference, things like that. And I think that will emerge out of this as a you know, a much more common way of meeting and doing business. Conventions, that's interesting too, because, you know, conventions, large conventions where you've got several thousand people coming in from all over the place. I think those will still happen. I think there's going to be a much more emphasis on safety precautions. Right now, you know, as we sit here, you know, there's no vaccine for COVID. There are social distancing guidelines in place. I think once we get a vaccine and people are more comfortable traveling and, you know, feel safer about interacting with each other, I think there will be precautions put in place, you know, more than we've seen before. I think, you know, things like buffet break stations where everybody's, you know, reaching out and, you know, grabbing the same, you know, pastry, you know, those kinds of things are going to change. But as far as being able to get people together, you know, fundamentally, I think that will still happen, but I would expect a lot more augmentation with technology like we're using right now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the other questions that came through is just about, you know, one of the biggest things when it comes to hospitality is going to be food, right? And I know that there's been a lot of studies that have been released saying, you know, prepared food is mostly safe and everything, but there's definitely a peace of mind component to that. And thinking about buffets and thinking about other packages that are offered, you know, are those things that people are thinking that are, you know, hospitality industry is thinking through or trying to think ahead of? Of course, that's going to be once people start gathering again in some way, right? Because you can't ship them thousands of food items, but when they do start gathering and how those things kind of look.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that I worry about a lot is we have a tendency to overcorrect in this business. So when we're faced with market declines or we're faced with you know, demand pressures, you know, in 2011 or 2001, you know, we essentially as hotel companies gave rise to the online travel agency business because we turned all of our inventory over to companies like Expedia and Priceline and essentially paid them a huge margin to go and do a better job of marketing our rooms than we were marketing them ourselves. And so now we spent the last 2 decades trying to wrestle back that control. So, and I think we've got a more symbiotic relationship now there. And I think on the food side of things, you know, what does concern me is, you know, I see a lot of activity right now where we're very focused on present moment. And, you know, we've got to seat people 6 feet apart. So we used to put, you know, 10 people at a round table in a ballroom, and now we can only sit 3 people at that table. Well, again, that's not sustainable. Now, maybe that's what people are requiring right now, but we've got to be able to move off of that. We can't tell our customers that that's how we're going to be setting up our rooms forever, because there's just no way. You can't cut your revenues, you know, 25% and expect to still provide the same services and everything that we had. So I think there's a lot of attention being paid to how we set up these rooms, the types of food offerings. I think product offerings will change. You know, certainly buffets are under scrutiny, but you'll see hand sanitizing stations. I think you will see, you know, some packaged items. You know, really focus more on individuals. And I think that the hotel industry will take a big page from what the restaurant industry is doing right now, because as they're reopening, I think they're innovating and finding new ways to serve people safely under this situation. And so I think we'll adopt that because we're not seeing demand for large meetings just yet. Surprisingly, weddings are that's the most activity that we're seeing right now for future bookings throughout the industry. But you know, as far as business meetings, I think, you know, corporate legal departments are going to have a lot of influence on you know, making sure that their company's employees are safe, what we call duty of care. So so that will definitely influence how we serve things. The thing that concerns me though is we have to be careful about, you know, not, like I said, overcorrecting, you know, cancellation terms in the short term right now. Absolutely. If somebody needs to cancel a booking, we understand that. But we have to be very careful that if we do away with some of those protections that we have in place, we could find ourselves, you know, with some what we call yield management problems where, you know, we've allowed business to cancel 30 days out and there's just no way to resell that space. You know, that could really harm our ability to recover as an industry as well, as an example.
So first, let me just comment to our viewers. Thank you guys so much for the questions. Keep having them come in. We're going to get to them as we go through. Loving them so far. And Ed, thank you so much for answering these so well so far. But I just wanted to kind of pivot with that. What exactly do you think an overcorrection? And I know it's hard to predict what a full overcorrection could be, because some could be necessary and proper corrections. But do you see things that are looking in that direction so far? Thinking if the vaccine does come in the next 12 months or so, are we able to pivot back in the industry with those corrections? And
I think things like meeting room setups and like I said, promising cleanliness. I mean, cleanliness has always been a fundamental.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's always clean and safe. We're always kind of the two cornerstones. But I think that there's a different interest and a different way of looking at cleanliness right now. So I think we've got to promise all of those things. But if you tell people, you're planning an event, you're planning a conference in 2023, and you're intending to seat people, where we usually seat people 3 per 6 foot table in a classroom style seating.
Mm-hmm.
If you're promising that you're going to do it at 1 per 6 foot table, I don't know that that's necessarily prudent when all of the people that will be attending that meeting are going to be sitting next to each other on an airplane to go to that meeting. So I just hope that the hotel business doesn't have to shoulder the load of saying, we're going, beyond, what's really practical to emphasize how safe we are, when we can certainly provide the safety. I think that's what we've got to maintain. But, if we start, just changing how we do business, we have to change how we do business. But if we, take, short-term precautions that we're taking now and make them the norm, that's going to have, significant depressive effects on the business. And it's going to create unrealistic expectations from the people that buy our services. And that's what I would be concerned about, is I think we've got to work together with our clientele, make sure that they understand that we're going to provide, safe, clean accommodations. But we don't have to drive our cost up $60 per occupied room to achieve it.
Great. One of the things that was asked is about how are we attracting people to the industry? But I wonder if that's maybe too soon to start attracting them back, or is that something that's already begun, or is that being planned out kind of in the future?
I've been
kind of closing up.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And, I've actually been concerned about talent drain right now, because particularly on the sales side, you've got talented salespeople. And like we talked about at the beginning, your question was a really good one. Sales was a foundation for somebody like me who, developed a career in marketing and sales. And so I'm concerned right now that as companies have furloughed salespeople or laid them off, that the best salespeople in our industry are going to go work for another industry. And you could say that about any department. If 52% of the employees are unemployed right now, they've got to go find work. That's a real situation, and that's a lifestyle or livelihood situation that people have to deal with. So I'm concerned about talent leaving. So as the business starts to come back, again, if you're a smart business person, and you're focused on business acumen as your number one attribute, and you want to get into management, roles, be it in hospitality or someplace else, smart business people are always in demand. And if you're looking for innovative ways to solve business problems, you're going to be, in need. And, even small improvements to legacy ways of doing things can yield big results if you take that over a large portfolio or over an industry or over time. So I think if you've got that mindset, there will be opportunities for you, because there's some of the people that are working in industry now that won't be when this concludes.
So Sophia asked a question, one of our viewers, that I think ties to that, which is, other than building skills right now, what are ways that recent grads can get their start in PR and marketing if there really isn't that job opportunity? And like you're saying, there may not be some of those, as many, and a lot of people have lost those positions. How do you continue to build that or get involved in the PR and marketing industry without those jobs right there?
Yeah, again, yes, networking, and I think trade groups, are a good way there, and that's probably that's just good fundamental business networking, and in a way to put yourself in a position to capture opportunities and learn things along the way. One thing I will say that's okay now, and I think 2008 taught us this, is that, you know, it's not taboo anymore to take a step back to a position that seems like it's, you know, below your level of capability. You know, hiring managers understand, you know, things happen, and it, you know, it impacts people. It impacts their career paths. I've interviewed a lot of people since 2008, and some of them took what would have in the past been totally taboo, a weird zigzag on their resume, and you would question that. People understand, though, that was a devastating economic time. Right now, we're in a devastating economic time. If you go work as a retail associate somewhere because that's the only, you know, income that's available to you, maybe it has nothing to do with, you know, the hospitality business, you know, go do that. You need to pay your bills, you know, go do that. But then when you're talking to a hiring manager, when you're sitting in front of me and we're talking about, you know, you wanting to get into marketing, you know, be prepared to demonstrate how that experience helped you and what you learned and developed to be able to be in a marketing role. And this is actually what a great coincidence. Literally just, you know, last year hired somebody in our marketing department that worked as a retail associate at Lululemon. And I wasn't even thinking of her when I was saying what I just said a moment ago, but absolutely, you know, and I think what we saw in her was Lululemon's a you know, hot brand, and, you know, they really have, you know, captured customer appeal, and they've done it in a short way, and they're disruptive in their industry. You know, maybe she wasn't at the level where she was making all that happen, but she was around those people. She kind of saw what was going on, and you know what? She didn't have that same old static way of doing things that a lot of other companies do. We're looking for somebody that could be open to new ideas. Brought her in, she was doing a great job, and so you know, she's somebody that's got, you know, that's very promotable because of how she approached her work, not because necessarily of the roles that she had, you know, in her previous jobs.
But applying her skills to the job that she had right then, you know, and then using that to get the position with you later on. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. You know, one of the questions that people were asking is, you know, maybe regional customers may come back because, you know, Southern California, maybe Northern California, different areas, different hubs. But, you know, a lot of the, you know, transnational travel or international travel, you know, is that going to be a lot harder? Like, what are your kind of perspectives on how that seems? Is that more difficult to attract those? And then maybe how do you attract the further national conferences or the international conferences and those kind of things? I know we talked a little bit about them, but attracting them, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, we're going to see, you know, I think the drive market, what we call the drive market, people that can, you know, particularly leisure travel that'll drive to different destinations. Mm-hmm. That'll come back first. In fact, some of the cities in Florida, a lot of beach communities ran 90% occupancy, you know, these last couple of weekends. So people are starting to travel there, but they're driving, they're not flying. I did see something encouraging that kind of surprised me with the timing of it. Delta said that they're bringing back some major routes in June, which was a little earlier than I anticipated them to say and do that. So that's very encouraging. You know, we have seen week over week demand increase the last 4 weeks, but, you know, until there's a vaccine, I think, you know, that's going to probably slow down again in the fall when we have a winter flu season. And then, you know, probably we won't see sustained growth until next spring at the earliest. And I think international travel, there's going to be a lot of precautions there. But, you know, business is so global right now, and leisure travel certainly, you know, is global. People have access to destinations that they didn't in the past. So I think that will come back, but I think it's going to really, you know, depend on, you know, people feeling safe. So there's certain destinations that could say that. I know Hawaii is very focused right now on you know, being safe, and it has essentially isolated itself from everybody. Yeah. And, you know, when the time is right, I think, you know, we'll open up and, you know, be able to say that, you know, this is a safe place to visit. So I think leisure demand, you know, people will be pent up, and there's what they're calling revenge travel, where people are so sick of being tied up in their homes. That will come back. But, you know, like I mentioned, you know, my trips to Asia, you know, there were health screenings going on, and I think that, you know, is just going to become the norm. So people will start to feel more comfortable with international travel.
Maybe so the norm even in here and just kind of around the world in different.
I would think so, particularly in your gateway cities. You know, I think LA, New York, you know, Miami, you know, Seattle, you know, you're going to see that, yeah, there's much more emphasis there. And then, you know, if they're able to contain anything that looks like it might be a problem, you know, they'll be set up to do that quickly.
So we're entering our last 10 minutes or so. So I kind of wanted to offer two things and then just kind of let you run with it depending on how you want to do that, which is just really, are there any other last kind of industry things that you wanted to talk about? And then also we have a lot of questions just about recent grads, again, getting into that industry, right? And then kind of thinking about transitioning, even if it wasn't for this, just once this is done, again, I think we talked a lot about it at the beginning, which is really good because I think it ties full circle, hopefully. But just kind of let you kind of talk about that. What are the final industry notes you wanted to talk about, and what now is your message for recent grads or recent alumni to think about their future and connecting with that? And we do have one request that wants to work for you on Aqua Resort, so that is one that is out. Yeah.
All right. Well, then I'll preface this. I'll give final remarks, and certainly happy to answer as many questions as we can. But because I really do appreciate, like I said, the question and answers. If even if we're not able to get to your question, if you've asked it today and we run out of time, or if you're somebody that's watching this session on the recorded version and weren't able to ask a question directly, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. What I say about networking is sincere, so I'd be happy to answer any questions or continue a dialogue there. So I just want to put that out there before I forget. But as far as those entering the industry or looking to carve their career path, I think I hear from people, mostly from people on the sales and marketing side, but I do talk to people that are interested in operations. It really kind of depends on where you want to go. I mean, there's all different types of organizations in hospitality. There's franchisors, franchisees, owner operator, asset manager, all of those, boutique lifestyle hotels, independent hotels. So just kind of think about what interests you. Be open to doing some things that maybe you didn't see yourself doing. I think that's really critical. But if you want to be an asset manager, I think things like finance and real estate are really critical. And those are also good skills to have, even as a marketer, even as a general manager, because you're going to understand what the people who own your hotel think about and worry about. And that's very, very smart to be able to speak in their terms or understand where they're coming from, or like I said at the very beginning, if you're trying to sell an idea to them, how to put it in a package that they're going to want to open. Operations, just good leadership. If your aspirations are to become, a manager or a leader, those skills are always useful no matter what you do. But, if you want to be a general manager, if you want to be, a regional vice president of operations, or, those are just, good skills to develop no matter where you can develop them. And then on the sales and marketing side, that revenue management has kind of become, over the last decade or so, kind of the front edge of that. And we're starting to see a convergence, though, where we had sales, marketing, and revenue all being very distinctive disciplines. Certainly it's my mission and the work that I do to kind of converge those, because I think it's the right approach. And I think, but if you're a salesperson, if you're really good with people and you're good at, finding opportunities, that's great. But I think you need to focus on your analytical side. And I think you need to develop those skills and make sure that you're focused on the right business that you're bringing to the hotel that's the most profitable, not just, the highest top line. Similarly, if you're, really analytical and, you have a hard time dealing with people, I think you need to work on that. You might be great as a revenue manager, just analyzing data and, changing prices and inventory controls. But as you start to move up, if that's what you want to do, you're going to be in meetings again where you have to communicate that. And I've seen really brilliant people struggle to communicate their ideas, and it was very limiting to them. So I think just take a look at what you're good at, what experience you may or may not have right now, and just try and supplement any areas. I always call them blind spots. Look for your blind spots and try and fill those in, because that will make you more complete no matter what stage of your career you're at. But if you're new, if you're recently graduated, just take every opportunity to find a way to add value to whatever company it is that you're intending to work for. And you'll be surprised how quickly things fall in line for you.
And I do want to say, so actually the questions that I was going through are all the ones that people were throwing out at us, and it just tied so well to what you were going through. So it was really nice. What I want to do is I want to say a couple things, and as I say them, if any viewers have any final questions that they didn't get that I maybe missed or something, please feel free to post those in the chat box. And I just wanted to say, Ed, I think some of the stuff I learned from you so far is just having this growth mindset about how to adapt to this change, right? And for me, from what I'm hearing from you, that's even from day one, from your first jobs and you're kind of taking those through 2001, 2007, and 8, and then all the way to now, right? Thinking through how do you fix those problems or how do you adjust to them and kind of push through them. And so that's very insightful for me to think about the industry in that way. Let's see, I think we have one or two more questions. You have someone who wants to be your LinkedIn friend. So Rick Dizon is going to be probably connect with you.
Aloha, Rick.
And then someone just says, thank you so much for sharing, Delena said, thank you so much for sharing your background and expertise. Coming from a similar experience, currently in an entry-level sales and catering position. But any advice on what you recommend to go, so sales and catering position, but recently sparked an interest in revenue management. Any advice on what you recommend to go in that route?
Yeah, I think, sit in on revenue meetings if you can at your hotel, if you're not doing that already. You'll hear the types of conversations that are being had about, forecasting and, making choices between, two different types of group bookings, for example, over the same dates, or even if there is no group business on the books, whether or not to take a particular booking now in the, that's far out into the future, whether you think that, you're going to be better off without it, something better is going to come along. There's a lot of data science that goes in there. And I would really emphasize that too. Data science and, machine learning are really becoming more prominent in the revenue management field. So, if you can be involved in those conversations at your company, do that. Again, I emphasize, associations that have that ability, but then you can also talk to your suppliers, your vendors there. There's a lot of companies that sell revenue management software. You might even consider going to work for them. Take everything you learn there and then come back to hospitality so that we don't lose you forever. But there's conversations you can have. There's facets of revenue management that are happening right now that you can gain access to, just by kind of asking and starting to understand those a little bit better now.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ed. I saw there was one question about opening businesses after a certain time. I'm just going to say, on that, mostly, I think regionally we're looking at health officials for that answer, when to open the business and those kind of things. So that's the only reason I didn't ask that question for that one student who's
no, but generally, hotels really, I think 30% occupancy seems to be the threshold. A lot of, what I'm hearing, hotels are saying if they can get to 30% occupancy, then they'll open back up. Some hotels right now are 90% occupancy because they're dealing with health workers and people like that. But others have just completely shut. Some because they're part of a larger portfolio might be running single-digit occupancies, but their portfolio as a whole is about 30%. So that's a number to look out for. And if you're talking to companies, kind of get a sense. I would keep that in the back of your mind.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to throw it back to Noemi here. I think it's about that time for her. So. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to speak with you. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James and Ed. It was a great conversation, and thank you everyone for participating in the chat box. And just a reminder, this session was recorded and we will be uploading it to our website, so please visit us soon. And also check out any future 49er industry chats. We'll be doing these on a regular basis, and we hope we could see you next time. So thank you everyone for participating, and have a great day.
And add Ed on LinkedIn. That's my final pitch for Ed right there. So do it. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the time.
Bye.
Thank you.